Federal government finalizes plans to establish cottage industries in the 774 local government areas of the country.
Every local government will have one industry, and this is based on industrial corridors, and we believe at the end of the day this is capable of employing over 200 people per cottage industry.
State governors appeal for low-interest mortgages to boost the housing sector.
Governors committed to providing land with primary infrastructure in suitable locations to ensure that the mass housing program takes off, thereby creating jobs.
Coronavirus infections in Nigeria rise to more than 30,700 as NCDC confirms 499 new cases.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we focus on issues in Nigeria's education sector.
All right, we are all conversant with the common saying that, quote now, 2 heads are better than one, unquote. But I must quickly also add a provisor which late Nelson Madiba Mandela helped to fill. And he said, again I'm quoting, "A good head and a good heart are perfect combination. But when you add to that a literate tongue or pen, then you have something very special." And Kingsley and I, and indeed other presenters on this program, of course, do present that something special that Nelson Mandela talked about. You may want to know how. Kingsley.
Well, Claire, the truth is, out there we also have a good many of our viewers who approximate or indeed surpass the prescription by Nelson Mandela. According to Mandela, of course, knowledge acquired through education and its potent power of transforming individuals and society is immeasurable. Education is certainly one of the indicators also used by the United Nations to measure human development, and it's not surprising. And the top 5 nations on the Human Development Index ranking, namely Norway, Switzerland, Ireland, and Germany, are said to have some of the best educational systems in the world.
Precisely. But UNICEF presents a worrisome educational data for Nigeria. Just listen, 1 in 5 world's out of school children is in Nigeria. Now, estimated 13 million children aged between 14 and 15 years are not in school. Now, the educational system is further burdened by protracted industrial strikes by both academic and non-academic teaching staff, which dates back 2009.
Well, certainly, but you know that the first industrial action that we had from the Academic Staff Union of universities was in 1981, and in the 1990s also witnessed a rush of strikes. But even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the Academic Staff Union of universities had been on a wave of strikes for breach of agreement, it said, between it and the federal government over facility upgrade, welfare and other working conditions.
So although government officials say investment in the past 5 years stands well over 1.3 trillion naira in that sector, education managers, however, say the investment falls far short of the UNESCO's recommendation of 26% of national budget provisions. So, on Good Morning Nigeria this Friday, we turn attention to issues in the education sector. I am Claire Adelabu Abdurrazak. Welcome.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I joined my colleague Claire in also welcoming you to the program. As she has indicated, we are focusing on issues in the education sector. Of course, Claire, you know, we can only pick out some of the items because it's a broad range of issues that you may want to deal with in the education sector. Primary, secondary, tertiary, and even then capacity building, facilities, infrastructure, and a whole range of others. Plus, of course, the matter of curriculum. But we can take out the aspects that we'll be discussing later on in the course of the program. Reaching you live, as always, on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are here in the Abuja headquarters studios. It's a cloudy morning here, and perhaps it's likely to rain later in the morning. Temperatures are also pretty low. In the meantime, let's join our colleague Ann Jibuno for the highlights of the morning news. Business news, of course, will follow thereafter. And much later, we'll have a newspaper review. Ann Jibuno, right now, let's take the morning news. Good morning.
Good morning, Kingsley and Claire. Good morning. Here is the day's news. The federal government has finalized plans to establish cottage industries in the 774 local government areas of the country for enhanced economic well-being and job creation. The Minister of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs, George Akume, announced this while briefing journalists after presenting his scorecard at the Federal Executive Council.
Every local government will have one industry, and this is based on industrial corridors. And we believe at the end of the day, this is capable of employing over 200 people per cottage industry. This is not small industries aside, but we call them cottage. And when you multiply that by 774 local governments, you know the number of people that will be given employment.
We have started in that process of organizing this so that our foreign policy can reflect the realities of today and the realities of Nigeria's national interest.
In the meantime, governors of the 36 states of the Federation have appealed for the design of a nationwide mortgage system that would support low-interest borrowing. This, they say, is to enable Nigerians own houses, which is the only sustainable way to boost the housing sector. This was at the Online Economic Council meeting, anchored from the Office of the Vice President, during which the governors also expressed gratitude to the Federal Executive Council and other stakeholders who put together the Economic Sustainability Plan.
We also support the federal government's plan to strengthen and expand our public health system, and we've made specific requests for support to ensure that in every state of the Federation there is at least one general hospital that is well equipped with infectious disease prevention, surveillance, and treatment capacity.
Also discussed with NEC the gross revenue that we're expecting from the into the Federation account, which will subsequently be shared. The revised 2020 budget has a total expenditure of 9.116 trillion, while the projection we're making for 2021 budget is at right now at 9.613 trillion.
The attention of the Office of the Vice President has been drawn to a series of tweets and online publications by Point Blank News and newsreel.com.ng, credited to one Jackson Ude. The story alleged that the embattled former acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, embezzled over 39 billion naira, out of which he handed 4 billion naira to Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, who instructed him to release some of the recovered loot. The same Jackson Ude has also been circulating a video on YouTube with a female commentator peddling the same lies. A release by Laolo Akande, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Office of the Vice President, stated with all emphasis that these are totally false and baseless fabrications purporting to reflect goings-on at the probe panel investigating Mr. Ibrahim Magu. Akande described the story as completely absurd in every respect. The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, says the executive is working hard to present the 2021 budget to the National Assembly by the end of September this year. The minister, who was speaking when she briefed the leadership of the National Assembly on the 2021 to 2023 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper. She announced oil price benchmark of $35 per barrel in 2021, $40 for 2022 and 2023.
2021 is put at 1.86 million barrels per day, while for 2022 it's put at 2.09 million barrels per day and 2.38 million barrels per day quarter year of 2023. Inflation is projected to be brought down to 11.95% in 2021.
Your oil price benchmark for the 2021 proposal of $35 per barrel. Now we always have this issue almost every year. It's very conservative.
The minister explained that the federal government is working to achieve 50% capital implementation once the revised 2020 budget is signed. Let's get the latest on COVID-19. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, has announced 499 new cases of COVID-19 in Nigeria. The latest figures released bring the total number of confirmed cases to 30,748 infections in Nigeria. A breakdown of the new cases from 24 states indicates that Lagos recorded the highest number for the day with 157 cases, while Edo State has 59. Ondo recorded 56, Oyo 31, Akwa Ibom 22, Borno 21, Plateau 19, Kaduna and Katsina have 18 cases each. Others are Bayelsa and the FCT with 17 each, Delta has 14, Kano 11, Rivers 10, Enugu 8, Ogun 6, Kwara 4, Imo 3, Nasarawa and Osun 2. The day's tally is completed by Abia, Ekiti, Niger and Yobe with 1 case each. Confirmed cases by Lagos State show that Lagos has the highest with 11,827, followed by FCT with 2,365, and Oyo comes third with 1,604 cases. With the latest development, total number of active cases stands at 17,513, 12,546 cases have been successfully treated and discharged, while 689 patients have died, unfortunately. Well, that's the news highlights for the morning. Thanks for staying with us. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Claire and Kingsley after this break.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Now it's time for business news, and let's join our correspondent, Chimaobi Walter Naji.
The Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning have agreed on an economic model to be used in actualizing the medium and long-term national development strategies of the federal government. The models are econometrics and input-output models for the preparation of macroeconomic framework for the Medium-Term Development Plan 2021 to 2025. This was disclosed by the Minister of State, Budget and National Planning, Clement Ikenade Agba, in Abuja at a virtual inauguration of the Central Working Group for the Development of Nigeria Agenda 2050.
For a robust long-term prospective plan, I recommend the application of the concept of futurology. Futurology is not only about postulating possible, probable, and preferable futures only, but also about creating the future we desire. This implies shaping and molding the future into an image we prefer, which should not be limited by the prism of the present or by whatever may be fashioned at any moment.
Meanwhile, the Nigerian Stock Exchange have continued on its losing streak as the market closed Wednesday, recording a 0.01% decline. Here is a graphic representation of the closing figures on the floor of the exchange. With business news, I'm Chimaobi Walter Naji.
All right, many thanks to you, Chimaobi Walter Naji, for the business package. And once again, just a reminder of our focus this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. We're looking at issues in the education sector. And of course, we'll be having a very important guest here with us. But right now, Sit by as we begin our newspaper review in just a moment.
Newspaper reviewer Bayo Tebe is right here with us in the studios. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning. Good morning, Claire.
Is it raining?
No, it wasn't. Yesterday it was. In fact, it was a relief rain. Part of the airport road had rain, and part of the city here was dry.
Well, this morning, as I said some minutes ago, the skies are cloudy.
Yes.
And
but the rains have not dropped.
They haven't dropped, but the temperature.
For my Jake for check, he's gone. When you said the clouds, skies are cloudy.
The skies are cloudy. Yeah. They so rest in peace. But the temperatures are cool.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to be very careful about corona.
Yes. The colder the temperature, the more devastating corona.
Absolutely. The lower the temperature.
Also a period for malaria. A lot of people are coming down with malaria fever. You know.
Malaria is endemic. It's dry season, wet season. It's all around with us. Let's begin our review this morning by taking a look at the Leadership newspaper. Leadership below the nameplate, NNPC records 19% gas to power supply increase. That's on page 13. No money is missing in NDDC, and that's attributed to the commission itself. It is on page 2. President Buhari assents revised 10.8 trillion naira 2020 budget today. That's also on page 2. Lead story, of course, is on coronavirus, and that's the kicker. COVID-19. Breakthrough as Nigeria creates own testing kits. That's fantastic. Breakthrough as Nigeria creates own testing kits. And you have a number of riders to that. 400 health workers, FCT Health Secretary, Nasarawa Attorney General test positive. NEC, that's the National Economic Council, and PTF, Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, to meet on reopening of schools and others. WAHO, that's the West African Health Organization, urges Nigeria and others to mitigate impact of pandemic on the vulnerable. JOHESU, that's the Union of Health Workers, donates PPEs to members on frontline duties. And popular CNN anchor Richard Quest relieves coronavirus experience. He says he's still having some after effects, haven't recovered from coronavirus. Oshibajo writes, Inspector General of Police wants alleged link to Magu funds investigated. As panel grills EFCC Secretary and Directors, operatives didn't search my house. That's Abu Salami, General Abu Salami, former head of state. Details of that story continue on page 6. And you see the Vice President there, Yemi Oshibajo, presiding over a virtual meeting of the National Economic Council in Abuja yesterday. $9.6 billion debt. How P&ID bribed Nigerian officials. Lawyer tells U.S. court. Details on page 2. How National Assembly lost 6 members in 6 months. Page 12. Stamp duty. 15,000 jobs at risk as NIPOST workers threaten strike. That's page 11. Outrage as Lebanese ambassador walks out on National Assembly members. That's also on page 8. Okay.
All right, that's interesting. The Nation, that's the next paper we're looking at, and straight to the lead story on the front page there. Magu battles for bail as EFCC chiefs face panel, and it comes with a rider, 4 billion allegation. Oshibajo demands probe and 16 top officials before Salami committee. Okay, the picture story you see, some suspects and their arms recovered during the parade by the police here in Abuja. That happened yesterday. And the caption to that story says, 7 held for Ekiti, Ondo bank robberies. Details of that on page 4. And just beneath that story, you have military banditry rolls with relocation of northeast insurgents to northwest. And there's a rider to that as well. Chadian rebel arrested in Katsina. Very captivating stories also from the Nation. Let me take you just a little above the nameplate. NEC PTF to parley on economy and schools. The details of that you can find on page 4. NEC, again, OK's governor's input in 2.3 trillion stimulus plan. It's on page 25, that's 25. And the matter of NDDC, Senate, NDDC IMC spent 81.5 billion naira in 8 months. Of course, the other stories had to do with parties and their political rhetorics. Well,
let's start with the issue of schools. Just as you indicated there, the PTF and NEC are contemplating, discussing about reopening of schools. So also have the principals of secondary schools under the aegis of ANCOPS has expressed surprise about the Minister of Education's pronouncement withdrawing SS3 in 104 federal government schools from the WAEC examination. Also, Parent Teachers Association also have expressed surprise. Private Schools Owners Association have also expressed shock. All these say that this is because contrary to the joint agreement they all reached. They said on Tuesday they all held meetings which had representation of federal and state government as well as the National Association of Parent Teacher Association, National Union of Teachers, and ANCOPS, and they all agreed that health protocols will be observed strictly, and there were initiatives to open school. He said it was based on that WAEC went ahead. The Minister of State announced a date for resumption, and which was later on confirmed by the West Africa Examination Council. However, Otumba Yomi Otubela, the president of the Private Proprietors Association of Nigeria, as well as Alhaji Haruna Danjuma, chairman, National PTA, said they are all in support of WAEC to go ahead with conducting the exam, and that was why the Minister of State announced this situation. However, Patrick Arregan, the head of WAEC in Nigeria, says as far as he's concerned, he will not say anything for now. It may be recalled that on Tuesday, the exam timetable was announced. Meanwhile, in Oyo State, the Commissioner for Education, Olasukami Olaleya, says that SS3 students in Oyo State are in school and they are preparing for examination. And as far as Oyo State is concerned, the marching orders given by the minister, it does not affect their schools. But meanwhile, they also continue to watch out for what the reaction of WAEC will be. In Ekiti State, the Commissioner for Education, Science and Technology says that proprietors of private schools and others had met, and they have set up a 21-man committee that is to monitor the pre- and post-resumption schools, and they are sure that the coronavirus protocol will be observed. Just only last week, Governor Ben Ayade of Cross River State, while commissioning a protective equipment plant, said that we can't continue to keep the children at home. He said that the more the children stayed at home, the more the moral decadence, the more the indiscipline, and the more they become very, very lazy and reluctant to go back to school.
Bayo, really, that's, fortunately we are discussing issues in the education sector, and I'm sure we have the, Honorable Minister of State for Education here with us. He will be here with us to speak to some of these issues. But the question to ask is, yes, what plans, what arrangements, have those calling for reopening of schools made for the safety of our children? That's a fundamental question, and that was what the minister was harping on. But again, you would ask, in how many months of the lockdown? We had ample time to do that. But let's quickly get on. I'm being told we should get on with the other aspects of the review. We have just less than 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, the other aspect of the review is the issue of the robbery. You recall that there was a spate of robberies between Ekiti and Ondo State. The Nigeria Police Command have now arrested 6 robbers who were involved in that. In that incident, 6 policemen were killed and other civilians too. And Ondo State House of Assembly, the Chief Judge of Ondo State, Justice Oluwatoyin Akeredolu, has been asked to set up a 7-man panel to investigate allegations of leveled against the Deputy Governor, Mr. Agbola Ajayi. 14 members of the State House of Assembly approved the impeachment notice. 9 of them objected. 3 others have been suspended already from the House of Assembly.
Okay, yeah, just before you take the editorial, there's a headline on the front page of the Leadership newspaper. It's right at the bottom of the front page. It says, outrage as Lebanese ambassador walks out on National Assembly members. Details on page 8. Now, it turns out, according to the story, that the meeting between the ambassador and the House Committee on Diaspora was cordial. There are a number of issues that arise from this very story. It's contempt in the first instance for any person to walk out on a committee of the National Assembly, or indeed of the Assembly, when it is in plenary. But then we also have to ask ourselves the question. The ambassador was there with the Honorable Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. Does an agency of government ordinarily, in terms of diplomatic relations, have direct dealings with an envoy, or the envoy goes through the Minister of Foreign Affairs? So these are some of the things that we also need to clarify, because summoning a person to appear before a committee is like a subpoena, equivalent of a subpoena. How frequently should that be used, and to whom do you issue it? And when you look at the terms of jurisdiction, these are some of the things that we need to take out. Some of these things can actually be done behind closed doors. They don't have to be formal. You can gather information and then proceed from there. But certainly, it is contemptuous for any person to walk out on the committee of the National Assembly.
I think you have given that issue a context,
yes.
Kingsley.
Yes.
So, Bayo, just for us to sign out now, we were to sign out. There's on the back page, it's the cartoon, usually. Let me go back to cartoon. Ripples, quickly. And we're not saying anything. I just want to read it out. And this is, can Sultan urge Nigerians to fast and pray to conquer COVID-19? News. Now, Ripple says, you want to kill us with fasting. There's no need praying and fasting when Nigerians don't even wear masks.
It says it all.
Says it all.
All right. Yeah, that's right. That's part of the lack of responsibility that we are seeing on the part of most persons around the country. Baya Toyebi, of course, you know there's a report in Imo State of a policeman who is alleged to have shot a motorcyclist because when the policeman requested the motorcyclist to produce his face mask, he didn't have any.
So he was shot for not wearing a face mask?
Yeah, absolutely. Somewhere in Imo State. Baya Toyebi, we hope you... Yeah, we hope you enjoy your weekend. And
thank you.
We'll see you next week.
Right.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the NTA. We're taking a short break. Now, when we return, we'll get ahead with our item for discussion, issues in the education sector.
All right, welcome back, and you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Let me just share a brief tale of the tongue and the pen with you. It's actually a beautiful romantic poem written sometime in 1856 about a maid and a judge who fell in love on first sight but could not get married, basically because of differences in personality, in language, and of course in their social context, encapsulated all in education. And this morning our conversation borders on what education can or cannot do. Let's take this backgrounder from Victor Azo.
Upon assumption of office in 2015 and understanding the maxim that education is the foundation of society, President Muhammadu Buhari promised reforms in the sector. Accordingly, a roadmap for radical change in the education sector between 2016 and 2019 was presented to the public by the Minister of Education. It was tagged Education for Change. The 3-year strategic plan was hinged on 10 pillars, including addressing the out-of-school children crisis, strengthening basic and secondary education, and improving quality assurance and access to higher education. The administration re-emphasized compulsory basic education for pupils, spiced with the introduction of the school feeding program. It also enhanced implementation of open distance and flexible learning for 25 polytechnics, approved 1.9 billion naira intervention fund for each university. In the period under review, the Buhari administration also modified the Unified Tertiary Matriculation Examination for candidates seeking admission into the higher institutions of learning by introducing central admission processing system, whilst making JAMB not only more transparent, but also more productive. This administration also ended the OND-HND dichotomy in the paramilitary services, introduced the Teachers' Professional Examination, and transferred Almajiri schools built by the previous administration to state governments and credible scholars of Islamic education for efficient administration and impact. In spite of all these, it doesn't seem that Nigeria's literacy level has reduced, as available statistics from UNESCO indicate that the nation has over 65 million illiterates. Incessant strike action in Nigeria's polytechnics and universities at different times has also not helped matters in the sector. Nigeria remains one of the countries with the highest number of out-of-school children, with about 13 million affected. There is still proliferation of unregulated private schools with dismal standards, and funding of education has failed to meet the 20% proposed by the UNESCO, as only 6.7% was allocated to the education sector in the 2020 national budget. What more needs to be done to actually reform the education sector as promised? Experts are already in the studio to provide answers.
Right, don't forget to join our conversation via our Twitter handle. As always, it will be displayed on the screen at NTAGMN. Let me quickly introduce our guests. First, Honorable Minister of State for Education is here with us. And for the first time, if I'm not mistaken, Honorable Chukwemeka Nwajuba. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, and good morning, fellow Nigerians.
We also have joined us here in our studio Professor Abdul Rashid Naala, who is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Abuja. Good to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me. Good morning, viewers.
All right, and then joining us from our Maiduguri Network Center in Borno State is Professor Isa Husseini Marte. As a Commissioner for Higher Education in Borno, Prof, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
It's from Maiduguri. Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Once again, I'd like to have you with us on the program. Let's begin with the Honorable Minister of State for Education. Just walk us through what the focus of the Buhari administration is on education.
Thank you very much. And again, good morning, fellow Nigerians. This short clip you just showed captures in a nutshell where our focus were. Actually, the Buhari administration is a product of many years of fastidious work that led us to the manifesto of the APC. When we were crafting the manifesto, because I wasn't in the manifesto committee, I was in the constitution drafting committee. If you look at the document that was produced, education became a fulcrum of what the APC government, being a people-targeted party, we came together. We pride ourselves as pro-poor, and the president and all of us in crafting that thought that the right thing to do would be to address how Nigerians become equipped first to participate in the economy. And that equipment comes from educating them first and foremost. And that was the base on which the first speech he gave on at his inauguration in 2015, when he said, "I belong to everybody, the Talakawas, the masses, the people." In our campaigns, these people are on mountaintops looking for him. He is pained with and so true to type. It was not even anywhere near contestation when the first person he appointed into the Ministry of Education was Malam Adamu Adamu, because Malam Adamu has always been at the script of this matter, and he himself is almost extremely pro-poor and almost acerbic in his own nature, and he came to bear, and this translated into the swift actions you've just asked. In the last 4 or 5 years, you've looked at what has been done with JAM, the Central Admissions and Processing System. But Professor Loye did, incisively dealt with the issue of admissions, so that you can, across board, see immediately with caps what must happen for everybody to get admission across board. What if you come in at your own level? He has retooled almost everything that was done that wasn't working. Even me joining the ministry in August, for one of the first steps we took was to go around handing over these Sangaya schools to those who can use them to run. What are we keeping them for? These are infrastructure for the students. The Teacher Registration Council, like you just pointed out, was introduced to standardize teaching across the country, because one of the you can have all the infrastructure in the world and there's nobody running, and he wanted to make sure that so 2.2 million teachers, we had to quickly go around the country and register property teachers. Every of our institutions engaged ASU. He almost pleads with ASU leadership. Some people say he's kowtowed to ASU too much. But Malam is guided by what the president wants to achieve, which is, let's have some stability. Almost all the revenue parents through at Ghana and all these foreign institutions is because the university system seemed wobbling. And to get some stability around it is one of the key. Is the same thing with our polytechnics. They were losing membership. They were losing studentship because people were addressing this dichotomy. The president incisively into the areas that are under his control and said there's no such dichotomy. We're going to continue to have everybody on the same pedestal. Everybody who's trained from anywhere is everywhere. But we have a huge population. And when people talk about the amount of money that is voted to education, whether it's increased or it is not increased, well, that's a function of those of my colleagues at the National Assembly. Because we've had this challenge. When I first appeared in the National Assembly in 1997-99, when we eventually got sworn in 1999, one of the first things we did was to enact UBEC. And UBEC was assigned to law in 2004 to compel, almost, if you read it, it's actually compulsory to get everybody into primary school. We may not be able to arrest parents and so on, but again, Buhari has done something that nobody had thought of before. Because what Malam Adamu did, they designed a program that incentivized you going to school instead of trying to arrest your father. So that if you can do that, you then create this, you're making it compulsory, but also incentivizing it. So the cash transfer schemes, all of these are geared to, it's been a robust scheme. But like I keep saying, Nigeria is relatively a not so resource-rich country relative to numbers. When you sell 2 barrels or 20 barrels or 2 million barrels of oil, and then you need to use it to service the affairs of everybody, then it becomes impossible to vote as much as you want to making of the right soup, or to making the right boots for the army, or making the right payment to teachers. So, and everybody's tearing at this one little pot. Nigeria is really essentially a very poor country relative to size. And that has impacted. So you may not necessarily blame everybody for not voting a percentage or recommended percentage, because at the ministerial presidential retreat that was held in 2018 by the ministry, because the president hosted where the mandate of the ministry was redefined, and the targets, the 10-point agenda of the Madam administration was endorsed by the president. I was still chairman of TEDFund at the time, and I was there to make sure that we rolled out this scheme. And each of them is targeted at addressing all the problems that we have, from infrastructure deficit to teacher debt, to students not learning outcomes, the assessment. There's a huge, the Ministry of Education is a behemoth. The gamut is expansive, and it will be difficult to find the resources within us, and that is why we've relied a lot on engagement partners, the international organizations, UNESCO, USAID, DFID. Everybody has been helping, especially in the Northeast, where you have a huge number of people who are disengaged from societal activities as a sociological context in which we dealt with, and all of them have not been able to participate at the same time.
Okay, let me just put you on hold and ask a simple, question. Has there been a policy shift, between the past and this past 5 years in terms of, addressing the issues of human and infrastructural deficits, that has plagued the education sector? Do we have specific policy shifts? Are there conceptual policy guidelines that is guiding the actions of this administration in the education sector?
Well, yes, like I said, I started out explaining those because I said, or as soon as we came on, this government came on board in 2015, they articulated a new roadmap. That's what led to this, what I said.
Yeah, so what's this new roadmap?
There are shifts in different areas because in the basic education sector, in order to bring children to school, we wanted to make sure that all the facilities were available. That's why I said the Sangaya schools, the encouragement of people to attend. That's the only way you must shift and refocus from trying to catch people by hand and incentivizing them. That's a policy shift. Instead of pursuing you and your parents, let me now incentivize you to release the children to school. Number two, that's for basic. We said, in order to get better teachers, let's not just allow everybody let's introduce a guiding set in which we can look at the oscillation and standards and watch it. So we got the Teacher Registration Council to regulate who can be teaching. It's not just enough to say you are a member of NUT or your governor has registered you or your local government chairman has put you, therefore you are a teacher. No. The government has tried to address that. Policy shifts in each of the where I told you also on admissions policy. I mean, when Prof will talk to you, he will speak to you about them attending JAM office yesterday. The entire university community in Nigeria was assembled, both some online and so on, compelling everybody to abide by the caps. It's not been done in Nigeria before. University professors were like they determine and tell you how much their quotas are, but now everybody will stick with their quota. I mean, we're not running a military regime, but we're trying to get everybody to obey the law, to obey the standards, to compare. That's really what policy does, getting everybody on the board, focused in a direction. And that's what in basic, teachers, university admission, standardization across board, getting everybody uniformity of focus and checking out outcomes for the purposes of running a country. Because the entire gamut of the education sector and its ecosystem is to produce for Nigeria a working workforce. And each time you see any lack in any problem with any of us, I blame myself. I feel this education has failed Nigeria in not producing for it what the workforce it needs. So when I see people who do well, I'm proud that Nigeria has, the education sector has produced this brain. Because it's our product. We take you from cradle to grave. And at that point, you're learning. So what we're trying to do is make people understand that this is our work. And it is everybody's work. Because if you hear me speak to parents and say, please help us with the children, get them to learn, because it's a partnership. Government provides the infrastructure and the workspace. It is not enough. There is never going to be enough. We don't have all the resources in the world. And education is a shifting compendium. It does not end at any point. The way I learned, when I started my first degree in Imo State University, and by the time I came to Jos for my PhD, the world of law had changed completely, dramatically. There are people in my set who now use to search for law reports. You don't need to go to the library and sit down for 100 years. You just keep clicking in the law, and then it gives you all the law in the system.
You've tickled Kingsley.
No, I'm not trying to. I'm just saying the world evolves. Today we are talking about online learning because of COVID-19. Everybody may not have the same access, and it is our responsibility to continue to increase that access. The country is looking at its data potential. Although the Minister of Communications is almost every day running to make sure that data expansion and broadband penetration becomes a fulcrum for the country. So it's a lot, sir.
I just wondering, Honorable Minister of State, now, from policy to outcomes, what would you consider the milestones of the administration in 5 years?
First, from basic, taking out, reducing the number of out-of-school children is a mix of problems. We've addressed from a possible 17, 15, 13 million. We are now down to sub 10. So even one child out of school is not a problem. But the Buhari administration in 5 years had taken out a margin of almost 6 million. So we're less than 9 million, and we're continuing. This is a continue. That is why this coronavirus problem is really a huge, huge, huge drawback, because all the work that had been done is simply unraveled in less than 3 months, and it pains people. You may not appreciate the human resource we have at the Ministry of Education. that's been targeted at the directors of basic, the directors of primary education. They've spent time working on these processes, getting these children, mapping them, finding out where they are. The type of work the current Minister of Environment, who was chairman at UBEC until last year, they done the mapping, the registration. We were at the process, at the verge of beginning to take the numerics so that we can have NIMSI integrate into our system and have each of all our children registered, because we're working on a scheme, and I'm sure you heard the first time when JAM said, look, I'm going to have everybody put NIMSI on his document in order to come in. Now, that was a furtherance of what had been achieved in the first few years, because we do not need to have a system where we keep asking whether a Lyon or London is no longer the name that he used at WAEC and the one he used at. You start from the scratch. If you issue a NIMSI from day one, that means for the rest of his life, there's nobody going to question his certificate. We don't need this. And it's embarrassing that we haven't done this before, or that it takes a Buhari for people to think about this. Yeah, that's the enigma of the Buhari system, because it makes you try to stay straight. Nigeria needs to stay straight in order to get everybody working in tandem. And that's where we are with this. So those policy shifts and outcome, it's from inputs that you get output. So we're at the point of inputs for all of this. And that's why I'm saying we're a bit worried that there's been an interruption in some of the systems that we have just put in place.
Okay. How did you take out some 5-6 million out of school children? How did you take them out of the streets?
Okay, two things. You open up the avenues for learning. You want to know what is the constraint. Some places didn't have teachers. I mean, I was going to some places in Gombe that there were no teachers posted. We have unfortunate states that, like Zamfara, where teachers were in class. So first things first, get them back to the place and have them taken. You see governors who are responding. El Rufai tried to show in Kaduna that he could go and register his own 6-year-old in a public school. That incentivized people. So we brought in the schools. When the vice president kept talking about school feeding, as if our life depended on it, we knew what we were talking about. People were not coming to school because there was no value in it. People wanted some, but once we introduced the school feeding program and made it almost a focus of this administration, and it sat in the office of the vice president. We've only just created a ministry in the second part of this administration to take care of it, because it had been worked out in the office of the vice president, and then the federal government has now asked the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, who is extremely passionate about this, to run the lives of this, because that's what brought children to school, so that our schools suddenly became valuable. We attracted people to come and eat at a meal a day, which actually is a savings in our health sector. Because, people look at you have to look at the ecosystem to understand that, yes, it appears that we are bringing children to school just for food, and that they come to school, and in the attempt, they learn. We use the model Oshun did. If you look at what Aregbesola did in Oshun, he showed how this could be done, and it was replicated around Nigeria. Now we have kitchens everywhere. In every community, there's somebody who runs a kitchen on our behalf, whose job it is to feed the children. Then the farmers in the area are aggregated into a supply chain. So we are growing the economy while admitting children to school. So there was a flood of children to school. Parents now release their children. Those who were worrying them before, please go to school. Let us know exactly. Let us know exactly what it is that is happening here. So
although those
brings the students to school. That's what we did.
Although those in the upper classes were sometimes raiding the junior classes.
That's expected. That's expected. So we always tell them to cook a little bit more.
Honourable Minister, before we expand the scope of our conversation and bring in our other guests, I'd just like to group in two questions into one. The first is, what is the situation between ASUU and government at the moment? That's one. Secondly, why is it that the children of our very top government officials do not attend our public schools?
I don't know if anybody can be tougher than me right now, but all my children are in public schools in Nigeria.
You're just one.
No. I'm saying you're asking for top, and tougher than you can't get tougher than this. I mean, after me here, you head to
But
the president.
you know what?
So I don't know the statistics you have, but when you make a position, I use myself as a focus of that. Because for me, I have 5 children. All of them are in Nigeria. One finished from Futo. The others are in Soka. I use myself as an example. I felt that with my compulsion is that we've been working for Nigeria. This is my calling. My calling is a Nigerian calling, and I use that as a paradigm for every other person. So, and that's where I will focus. I don't know what other people are doing in their homes and what their challenges may be, because every human being who is a sociological being is a product of his own challenges, and it's peculiar to everybody. So I can't use myself as a yardstick over everybody. But if you say top government official, I present myself as the toppest you can say. But and having modeled that, I will now go to our engagement with the university system. The university system in Nigeria is robust. We have nearly 181 of them private, public. The ones that belong to the federal government are less than 100, really. And state governments have infused this. However, and I'm sure when the Vice Chancellor will come to expound, he will tell you what the challenges are in the industry. Running a university system is not a tea party. It comes with a huge gamut. And then if you look at the bracket, the age bracket, you're talking about those who are from 18 to 28. And these people are the most volatile, the most agile, you're the most population you have in the country. That's where the human resource factor becomes an issue. So you're going to be looking at a country like Nigeria with 65,000 members of lecturing staff, nearly 10,000 professors. I'm not sure where you can find that in Nigeria. Go to NUC. Professor Rashid, who used to be the Vice Chancellor at BUK, who is now our one of the most brilliant minds you can find. But because the amount of worry from professors, his gray hair has just simply sprouted everywhere. Now, why is that? Because you're dealing with people who are as knowledgeable or even more knowledgeable than you probably are. I mean, I'm talking about people who were my professors, who are people who taught me in school. And there's no way you're going to you're running an academic regime that does not take into cognizance what they are thinking. So our main constraint with them at the moment, there's actually no constraint, and it's understanding it. When I started, I said some people even think Malam Adamu is almost a member of ASU because he gives them almost everything, because he understands what it is that they've said. And over the years, we've had less acrimony between us and them because we're in constant dialogue. We've engaged them at but they have now a labor issue. There's a labor issue which has brought us together with the Ministry of Labor and Productivity, Labor and Employment, my brother Senator Chris Ngige, who has been carefully negotiating the issue of IPPS. Are
they still on strike?
Technically, yes, because they declared a strike on March 23rd, for March 23rd. So technically, yes, but we respect that. Because, like I pointed out, ASU means well. ASU means well. Like most Nigerians who agitate, it's just that ASU is agitating at a higher level, at the level of professors. They can't be agitating like schoolboys. Their own agitation is different. So this engagement, they mean well. What they want for the university system is the best in a country that has very little, minimal resources. So they've had to manage their expectations while they introduced needs assessment. It was because of ASU's agitation that we went to the universities and did the needs assessment. And Buhari, President Buhari, once he signs up to something, he remains faithful to it. So we've been going around universities commissioning the needs assessment programs, try to resolve that. We've agreed with what they also recommended, that we sign up to the visitors to the university to come and the visitation panels to the university. I'm sure Malam Adamu will sign off on that to be gazetted, because he has already, the president has already gone ahead with almost everything that ASU has asked for has been met. The ones that are money based and we don't have the resource, we also explain, and they understand, and they maybe sometimes limit what they can. But ASU is focused on making sure that the university autonomy is not toyed with because of IPs. And we've gotten to the point where IPs has resolved all their problems. I'm not sure if we open a new discussion, they will still find anything, because almost all the problems that were associated with IPs have been resolved. And the AGF, I met with him yesterday. I met with the AGF yesterday at our PTF meeting, and I asked him, and he said every note that the universities have dropped, that he has tried his best to resolve them. They are working on it, and like all systems and software, you must keep updating. You must keep resolving. If you can't capture lecturers who do not have their who are teaching in multiple courses, or you want to have contract professors coming in, we didn't make provisions for those who are not on IPs. Now IPs has made provisions for them. So, and the vice chancellors themselves are driving, because the vice chancellors were lecturers before they became vice chancellors. You can't just come from outside to do so. So even more than us, they are the ones engaging IPs. You must do this, you must do this. So Nigeria is responding. But like I said, my appeal to us is they are fathers to the nation, mothers to the nation, bright minds, extremely qualified people. They just need to help us run the country, because this is just running the country.
I was going to ask you a question, but I will refrain from doing that in the meantime, because the problems of industrial action in our tertiary institutions, particularly universities, of course, came to a head first in 1981, and since then we haven't recovered from it. The 90s were horrible in terms of industrial action, and we have seen wave after wave of industrial action. And the one question that often comes to mind is, look, isn't it time for us to reform how we govern our tertiary institutions, particularly universities? I want to bring in Professor Abdul Rashid Naala, who is Vice Chancellor of the University of Abuja. Before we get into how we run our universities, the federal universities in the first instance, take a look at the educational landscape in Nigeria. Let's have your thoughts.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, and good morning, viewers. That's a very important question, actually. Educational system in this nation, as the Honorable Minister said, you have education on the concurrent list. State government have from elementary school to universities. Federal government also have from post-primary school to universities. That means that every level of government is able to contribute to education in Nigeria. We have a kind of harmony in the areas of curriculum, largely because there are national bodies that are monitoring to make sure that standard, quality, all of these are observed. We have examination bodies that are national in outlook, the WAEC, the NECO, JAMB, all ensuring that standard and quality, and that we have assessment strategy that clearly, understands what, these qualities are throughout the nation. From fewer schools during colonial era, owned by the missionaries, owned by, some organizations, to larger schools now. Federal government has so many schools, state government, some places even local government might want to do something. But the point I'm trying to make is that today we have so many schools all over, because also our population is huge, about 200 million. So if you're talking about what the situation is in Nigerian education system, it just depends on who you're talking to. Some people tell you standard has gone down because some people are looking at the kind of schools they had during colonization, where missionary schools, especially in the south, southwest, south-south, was very strong. And so they will tell you, there's no more morality. We have cults, we have all sorts of things today. Some people will say the standard of yesterday is stronger than what we have today, but they tend to forget that we're in an electronic age. There are just so much today, that informs what you call education. We have changed even policies on education several times. The kind of policy we had before, during colonization, where people are trained to be clerks, basically, because the white were not interested in the kind of things we are interested in today. You know, our schools today is about training young people who will actually make a difference in their nation, in all the areas, technical, you know, science, agriculture, and so on and so forth, who can really be movers and shakers of our society. So what is really basically different is the kind of private institution that we have today. And you have a parent who have to send their children to elementary schools where they pay thousands, you know, in tuition. You have them who send their children to post-primary school and pay thousands, 300,000 in a year, 1 million. I've even heard about that. Same parent send schools to tertiary institutions where they pay or where they don't want to pay. People don't know that or don't realize that federal government institutions up to today, especially universities, you know, is tuition free. You know, nobody pays tuition in the university, in the federal university system. Obviously, there might be some fees, but these are very, very limited. So the question often, therefore, today that I ask is, what is our understanding of the need of education, of the need of the nation, of how we merge our needs as a nation to the kind of education that we give? Are we ready to give this education? Do we think government alone must be responsible? Do we think that as parents, as students, we have our contributions to it? And I think that is where we have not really resolved. Parents have not resolved. Students have even no idea sometimes. I mean, and the government, I don't know, sometimes not as courageous to insist that education must be the responsibility of everybody. Everybody. Otherwise, I mean, you blame one part and the other, yet you do not look at yourself to say, what am I doing about this? In other parts of the world, what I know is that even the student has responsibility, because the student has to actually contribute to funding him or herself to go into school. But that is not the case in Nigeria. And most of the crises we have in education in Nigeria is because of this fact that we have not resolved, you know, what our responsibilities are in education system.
Okay, Professor Abdul-Rashid Nala, thank you for your evaluation. All right, let's turn our attention to Maiduguri Network Center and Professor Issa Mate. I'm not sure, but I think it was the Minister of Labor and Productivity, Comrade Chris Ngige, that used this word for the first time when he described some group of Nigerian youths as unemployable graduates. I think he said we have more unemployable graduates than we do of, you know, those with skills and all that. And that leads me to my question, whether in terms of quality, how do you evaluate the certificates that come out or that we produce from our universities, from our tertiary institutions, from our schools all over?
Good morning. Thank you. Actually, we are doing very well compared to other countries like in Africa. Nigeria used to produce the best graduates because previously the training was done in such a way that after graduation you could easily apply. So there were lots of hands-on training. But over the period of time, all these things have been have gone down, and you find some graduates, after completing university education, are found wanting. But others do extremely well, because if you look at even the number of Nigerian graduates in United States or Europe, people that graduated from Nigeria and gone to those countries, they still do extremely well. So what we need to do, it's really to make sure that it's not just a matter of memorization of the curriculum, but to bring practical applications, especially in the sciences or engineering, so that someone who has BSc or B engineering should come out and be involved in, let's say, construction, if it's a mechanical engineer or civil engineer. You know, a pharmacist can easily make drugs. And as a pharmacist, this is what we train our students. At any time, take a pharmacy graduate, put him in any industry, he will produce drugs for you. So we need to also extend this to other disciplines. It's not only a matter of just training or classroom lectures, but when you go out, can you really practicalize all what you have learned? And the other important thing that the Federal Ministry of Education has introduced is this entrepreneurship, because everybody cannot be accommodated in the government, you know, to get jobs. So people should start thinking outside the box, so that, you know, all the knowledge you get from the university, how can you use it, you know, as a entrepreneur? So there are lots of things to do, but it's not late. But definitely, we are not as we were before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Marte. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. I want to come back to Professor Nala, Vice Chancellor of University of Abuja. A while ago, you were talking about the need for better stakeholder understanding of their respective responsibilities in the education system, particularly with regard to tertiary education. Will you elaborate on that?
Well, you have a situation in which, you know, everybody expects the university to perform miracles. But it is the same universities where you don't pay tuition and you don't want to pay tuition. And the government itself is taking responsibility, yet the government is not able to give enough money to the university. I mean, aren't we deceiving ourselves? At the end of the day, what kind of education are you going to have? I mean, education that would meet the test of time is education that is holistic, you know, that is able to have all facilities that it needs to, you know, to deliver. And this facility is not just the lecturer that teaches, but the materials, you know, that are available. So if everybody understands that he or she has responsibility, including the students, you know, then the whole thing will change. University will have the kind of facilities they're supposed to have. Parents will pay their own share of it. Students will pay their own share of it. I mean, if you tell a student that you must work and really complement what your parents are paying, you know, suppose parents pay money. Today, students will demonstrate and say, no way, you know, it's supposed to be free for all, free always. I mean, these are the kind of, you know, concept that we hear all the time. So,
and they forget that abroad, to which they often make references, that students obtain loans, and sometimes, you know, they pay for those loans several years after graduation.
When I listen to all sectors cite, you know, abroad, I just laugh, because we do not even understand, not even close to understanding what is happening abroad. For example, this idea that Nigerian students go abroad and do very well has nothing to do with some of the things that we assume. I mean, they're just some realities that these people have innate tendency to succeed. They are very strong in terms of their capacity to go other places and understand it and use the facilities that is available to prove their superiority. It may not have to do with what they are bringing all the time. Obviously, it's probably part of it. So there are just so many factors. But the point I'm making is that we have to be serious as a nation. We must be courageous as a nation. We must love this country for once and stop pretending. Because what we do today is pretend. And I don't know, and I don't know why we keep pretending, because other nations have gone. Look at Singapore.
No, okay,
Look at Brazil.
No, we are pretending about what?
We're pretending that we are really, giving all our best to produce good universities, not realizing that everybody is running away from he or her responsibilities. And that's the point I'm making.
I just want some clarification, Prof. Sure. I know that under the 2009 agreement between government and ASU, some specified amount of funds was supposed to be allocated to universities to take care of their needs by the federal government. Okay. By the federal government yearly. I think from the outset it was about some trillion naira yearly to universities, specifically for facility upgrade.
Sure.
From your evaluation, do you think so far with what has been provided for the universities, is it commensurate with what we have in terms of facilities in the universities?
The question we must ask, and that's part of the problem. We talk at the top, we do not go to the roots. Does the federal government that is saying, I'm going to do this, does it have money to really do it? Do we look at other responsibilities that I'm talking about? Are industries participating? Are parents participating? Do students have a role in it? I mean, you see, a laboratory is not what just a federal government, just create. I mean, in some laboratories, in some universities, they are the lecturers that actually get grants, sometimes to bring equipment in through their grants, which they teach. So they collaborate with industry. They collaborate around the world internationally. They submit, grant proposals that also include some equipment. I mean, the point I'm making is that it's beyond the surface level to which we tend to do it in Nigeria. And that's why we've not achieved our goals. Most of, what we hear people say is to direct our attention to one place.
So what in essence are you asking? What kind of collective responsibility, especially from the parents and the students, are you asking?
What I'm asking is that we must go back to the table. We must, for once, forget about ourselves. We must think about Nigeria. We must think about the place we want Nigeria to be in the Community of Nations. We must think about the future of our nation, what we want these young people to be able to do when they are in charge. If we don't think about that, and then we must all accept our responsibilities, all of us.
Yeah, well, Professor Nala,
we don't.
Professor Nala, let's pause you in the meantime. Let's bring in the Honorable Minister of State for Education. The bottom line of what Professor Nala is saying in terms of shared responsibility would take us back to the 1970s when Nigeria, coasting on the oil wealth, scrapped tuition fees in universities. Look at the population we had then, look at the population we have today. It's gladdening when you were talking about the interface between the Ministry of Education and ASU, that, you respond to them. You were also chairman of TEDFund, and you can see the intervention of TEDFund in the universities, but all of this would appear to be inadequate. In terms of policy shift, are we likely to see a situation where, as Prof indicated, and this has often been the point of agitation for those who evaluate the education system, look at the fees payable in elementary school, look at the fees payable in secondary schools, and then you come to the university. I mean, you're a lawyer, and you went to a state university, but look, consider how much you paid. Consider how much those in federal universities also pay to read professional courses. And some of them, after reading these professional courses, whether in medicine or engineering, the next thing they take off, brain drain out of the country. Whenever this issue is raised as to whether can we have some reasonable tuition being introduced, I don't know what the population of University of Abuja is. Let's assuming you are 10,000 student population. If 10,000 students were to pay 100,000 naira per session, would that not to some considerable extent solve the problems of ASU that they are always complaining about, infrastructure and allowances and so on and so forth? When are we going to face this problem head on in terms of funding? Because as you very well know, the government doesn't have all the funds. You are a top government official.
Thank you, my brother. And again, Nigeria is ours to run. Nigeria belongs to all of us. I think that's what Professor Nala wants everybody tries to understand, that this is a collective responsibility. We're not just, we didn't just impose ourselves. What we're trying to do and what you're asking is how do we make that policy shift? But you have to understand the basis of the policy. We actually set out to produce from Nigeria, and which is still the mandate of the Ministry of Education, to produce for Nigeria a workforce. I keep repeating it. In fact, the Ministry of Education should be called the Ministry of Manpower Production. That's what we do. We take, because if you're going to have a policeman who can read and write, he has to start from the day he comes to school. If you have a professor of medicine, he has to start from class 1. If there's no such thing as your mother give birth to you and you suddenly appear as professor, it won't happen. We have to start you out at the basic. So Nigeria as a country has looked at itself and decided that it is important to invest whatever it has towards, first of all, producing that number of human beings to do this. In the agitations of the 70s, the universities and ASU, and I keep going back to why ASU in the strikes, if you remember when students did Ali Must Go, if you remember, all of those agitations were basically targeted at getting resources into this manpower development at the tertiary level. So government then decided that to widen the ability of everybody to attend university, to make that available, we need to take out that key ingredient and assume it. Now, the way they did that, prior to that point, students were also getting what was called bursary. Not just that you weren't paying tuition, you were also getting money for going to school, which is essentially a cash transfer scheme, what you call bursary in those days. And now, government has left that part anyway, because government can't sustain the bursary schemes all across the country. But the idea that we should make sure that as many people as possible get tertiary education is still important. We cannot finance it wholly, but it is still important. We have a responsibility to the poor of this country to help them move up. There are now nearly 100 private universities in Nigeria. All of them put together still do not accommodate up to 10% of what the public universities accommodate. That is because that 10% that you see in private universities are asked to pay fees. So people opt not to go there. Some of them have fantastic facilities. Some of them are equipped properly for some of the courses that they offer. But still, people are not headed there because they are fee charging. So it's not as if we don't have a fee charging system in the works. There are. But the primary responsibility of government is to put some sort of level playing field for everybody to participate. And that's what the federal universities represent for us. We have also then excluded those private people from the TED fund allocations. Because TED fund, which also again is a product of ASU's agitation. People must recall, because the Babangida administration brought the education tax fund. What the Buhari administration has done is recalibrate how it functions and make sure that nobody can do the things we did prior to Buhari, which is chairman of TED fund can simply decide where he wants an allocation to go to. Now we are governed strictly by law. So we brought back Bogoro, the professor who was running before. I say, look, now this is Bogoro, who also from the university understands that every university must take this derivation directly, and it must be done. Now that is our idea. That's the way government has intervened, but it is also not enough. I keep going back. It's not enough. There are many ways we can. There are so many innovative ways to go around funding. For instance, if you are playing in Iwanyawu National, and you happen to get a club in CSK Moscow who's buying you, there's a fee to the school. There's a fee to the people who developed you as a talent. But we Nigeria. Every money we've spent to send them, Nigeria gets nothing for it. We just hemorrhage money. They will be there fomenting trouble for us in Nigeria with the training we gave them, and they are abroad enjoying the fruits of what we did. And then we are the ones that they're telling we are stupid people who don't know anything. When they have finished, look, I want you to think about it like it's a dialect.
Is that not a gap? Is that not a
that's
gap?
That's what I'm saying.
Isn't that a justification for you to now also pay for it?
Yeah, no, but you see, what Professor Nala is asking is that if people can rethink in a sociological context and say, this country is ours to run, instead of abusing it, can you please do a checkoff from your salary in that nice hospital where you work in Birmingham and say 10% of what I should go back to my alma mater so that they can use it to help? I mean, there are ways around it. If we agree with what he's saying, let's think about Nigeria as a country. Let's not look at it as a place you take away from. I mean, for me, I'm now in my 50s, getting old. One of the things I tell my own children coming up, I say, look, this country, we have no other. For me, I have no option. We need to understand that this country is ours to run. We need to regard ourselves as stakeholders, not as sharers. Let's take something. We must look at this country from a perspective that what can I put input? And I'll show you, when I came into the Ministry of Education, one of the first things I noticed was the bureaucracy would not allow, even if you gave the funds into the ministry, how will it be used? So I set up what I call the RRR. If you go online, you see Rapid Repairs Report, where I invited people to, friends of mine, we made donations, and we are repairing schools. Not because I couldn't do it as Minister of Education, but because the bureaucracy would not allow me even spend the money I did. So I now instituted this nationwide thing that we are repairing schools in Hong, Adama, anywhere you see any of these. Instead of putting it online and making fun of Nigeria, commit yourself to the country. That's all he's asking. What he's saying is simple.
Honorable Minister, I will put you on hold.
Yes, please.
Because when we come back, we'll look at what the state of our unity schools. It's an appalling situation, if you ask me, because I have my children in some of those schools. And then we'll also look at the roles of bodies like the PTA and the old students associations. How can they help to bridge this gap that Professor Nala has identified? Professor Mate will be back with you in a short while after this break. Don't go away.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. My colleague Claire had put the minister on hold to say that we're going to introduce the questions with regard to unity schools, which is at the secondary level. I still would like us to, Claire, pursue the issue of the tertiary institutions. I'm going over to Professor Martin in our Meduguri Network Center. Professor Martin, I'm listening to your brother, Professor, here in Abuja. That's Professor Nala, who is Vice Chancellor of University of Abuja. Tell us something. What are your own thoughts with regard to the current governance and even funding arrangements of the university? Because sometimes when you listen to the agitation by ASU and the various mechanisms that the government has set up, Education Tax Fund, which has now morphed into TED Fund. TED Fund is doing all kinds of things in terms of faculty upgrade, infrastructure, publications, and so on and so forth. And lately, the Federal Ministry of Works has also been fixing roads, internal roads inside our campuses and all of that. The question then arises in terms of stakeholder responsibility. The alumni aspect has been stressed by the Honorable Minister of State for Education. But what would you expect to see? I know that it can be a hot issue. What would you expect to see if you have, say, 10,000 students in a university, and I believe that's actually a small number, and each were to pay 100,000, you have 1 billion naira. 1 billion. You don't have to pay the 100,000 at once. You can pay it over 2 or 3 installments. That would be 1 billion naira. Couldn't that also help solve some of the problems, rather than every time going on strike, and complaining about inadequate facilities and so on and so forth?
Very much. Sometimes it's not a matter of the quantum of the money one gets, but what do you do with the money? So if you look at the Nigerian education sector, The Ministry of Education or the federal government is doing very well because it pays all the salaries of academic staff and non-academic staff. In some of these first generation, second generation universities, the federal government pays almost 11 billion a year per institution as salaries. And then you mentioned TED Fund. TED Fund has built so many infrastructures. So what's left is with the university management. Even if they are charging let's say 50,000 per student, half a billion for, let's say, an institution with 10,000. But some of them, they are up to 40,000. It's up to the management to really increase the internally generated revenue and then use that judiciously. So a government that has covered all your salaries and then has built all the structures for you, and then students are paying tuition. What do you do with this tuition? In the United States, I worked with University of Virginia for almost 20 years. It's a state university. When I was there, it was the best state university, a public university in the United States. And it's owned by University of State of Virginia. And the university gets only 13% from the state. But it's the university that is generating its own revenue. And it doesn't charge tuitions that much. Private universities and other universities like Harvard, they charge $40,000 to $50,000 per student per annum. University of Virginia for in-state, it charges 3 to 5 at that time. Probably it's over that now, $5,000. But the money is put in the proper and good use. So if we do that, then definitely we'll reduce most of the problems we have in our universities. And there should be accountability and transparency in all the institutions. They are lacking in most of our universities or tertiary universities because nobody is looking at what they do with their internally generated revenue, especially tuition from students. And you go to some of these universities, no electricity, no internet connectivity, and yet students pay. So as I said earlier, it's not the amount of the money. We have private universities, so many of them. Are they performing, as the Honorable Minister of State said, better than the public universities, even though they are newer universities? No. So first thing, I have to commend the Federal Minister of Education. Really, there is very few countries pay 100% of salaries of staff, academic and non-academic. Globally, you hardly find that. And then building structures, giving grants to these universities. So as tertiary institutions, we have to sit down and generate our own revenue without tasking parents or students, because the government has already done that, giving you that chunk amount of money. So personally, I believe, building the internally generated revenue and using it judiciously, it's the way forward, not only depending on government or going on strike because government has not done this and that. We have to think outside the box. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mate. Thank you. Back to the Minister before we bring in Professor Nala. Honorable Minister, the Unity schools are supposed to be centers of excellence. But I'm sure you agree with me that most of them are now centers of dilapidation in terms of structure, in terms of facilities available, and even in, the learning facilities and or whatever. What attention is this, your ministry given to the Unity schools across? There are 104 of them.
Thank you very much. We're actually taking them to 120 because we're doing 16 new FSTCs. That's the Federal Science and Technology ones, because we want to increase. We're focusing more on STEM because some of them were like Kingsley had said earlier.
No, you are the Oga.
That some of them were modeled originally to produce as grammar schools. Now we have FCCs in the mix. FUCs, Federal Unity Colleges, as we call them, directed at two things. One, as model colleges. They are model for people to replicate. That's what we think standards should be. Then two, they are supposed to, they are designed to help encourage nation building. One of the things that has happened over time is that they may not have been run optimally. We started out them being elite. King's College, Queen's College Enugu, Queen's College Lagos, Yaba, as the case may be. They were, just by name alone, you understand what they thought it was. Until we got to Suleja Academy for Gifted Children. So the names alone describe to you what was the target. It was like supposed to be that the nation there's a precipitated amount of people who are the cream, and you crop that and to train them for that. That was what it was targeted at. But somehow it's now been made available to everybody. Every year, this year, we'll probably have 100,000 applicants for less than 5,000 spaces. Because the 104 units, you need to appreciate that what you have is 100. Right now, we're having intakes at 104 of them, because the 16 haven't all been built. So these 104 are in 5 streams in class 1. Class size, maximum 35. Because teacher to person ratio, class sizes, the way the schools have been built, gives you what we now aggregate into what should be admitted in a school in a year.
Is that what is obtainable?
That's what's obtainable.
Are you sure?
Well, when we came into power, when this administration came in, we've had this streamlining to enforce it, and that's what may have caused all the friction that everybody is hearing. Because now it's enforcement that brings friction. Because without contact, elementary physics will let you without contact, there's no friction. So what must have led to friction is that there's now contact. The ministry is saying, wait a minute, you're not. These are the guidelines you're supposed to use. Because for you to admit 400 students in any one stream means that you must have 40 into 10 streams, and that's not available. So what it means is that what our capacity can hold, an intake for class 1, primary basic one, JS1 can only have A, B, C, D, E. If you have 35 in all of these streams, that means for every 2 classes, you have 70 students. So if you have 70 students, how did you get to 400? 70 students in A and B, 70 students in B, C and D is 140. You add another one, you just only got into 175. So how did we get to 400? That was what the issue was. So why are you now? Suddenly, alumni like you were in cahoots, because they had an umbrella which were working with the principals to admit more students.
I didn't go to Unity
School.
School.
Okay, you didn't go to Unity School. Okay, I thought you were.
No.
But PTAs will have an election, and then they will have a chairman who believes that he is also entitled to admit. Because when Professor Nala was talking about stakeholder and Nigeria, and why it is an ecosystem where everybody needs to rethink. Think about Nigeria. Come to understand that we are all givers to build. There's no way you can be doing this to us. And that's what led to some of the dilapidation you saw. Now, when you bring a principal to a school, he or she determines how that school is run. And like Professor Mate has just pointed out, money is one of the things I found that is not the issue. People keep talking about funding. What does it take to clean this floor? It's not funding. You already have the staff. You already have the money. It's just the consciousness to do it. When I became Minister of State for Education in Nigeria, I started visiting the unity colleges. Half of the time, unannounced. So everybody's running helter-skelter because I'm still in fit, and I walk maybe 10 kilometers around the school, and they're out of breath. They can't follow up. They are not willing because they don't want you to see some of these places. I go into the dormitories. People are not. Why would you want people's towels to be inside the rooms where they live?
Have you been to the one in Apo?
Yes, the government one is a bit messed up here. But it's all boys, and there's a way. And we've asked.
You need to see the dormitory, the hostels.
Yeah. So I'm saying, we have all a responsibility. I'm only describing a responsibility.
Precisely.
Everybody gets the same amount of money. All of them get the same amount of money. All of them we pay just the same thing he's described. We pay the teachers. The Federal Civil Service is their employee. We pay everybody. Every resource is provided. Is management. We look at what happened in federal government called in Benin. Once a principal took over the place, every little resource, they repaired everywhere. You will think that it wasn't the same school from less than 6 months. If you go to, in fact,
I'm sorry, Honorable Minister, I'm sorry to jump in here so that you take it along. We're talking about responsibility. Couldn't we also focus on supervisory responsibility? Look, if a principal is not up to scratch, I mean, it's similar. There are procedures for disciplining that person or getting the person out of the way. We know that people will often try to pull strings, as the saying goes, but couldn't we also kick that in? That's one leg. Second leg is sometimes we assume a great deal. How much of governance training do these managers get, whether federal government colleges or even universities? The fact that, with the greatest respect to them, you are a professor of a certain field doesn't mean that you are probably competent to manage a system such as complex as a university. Are we going to get into that level?
But you're again correct. Again, I revert to what Professor. It's a mindset. Everything is a mindset. Some people think being a minister is a big deal.
That's right.
For me, I think it's a huge service. It takes a lot of you to be at 6:30 a.m. running to the NTA. As a private legal practitioner, I don't know what you pay me for me to show up at 6:30. Who are you? But because you're in government, you become responsible because that's what you want to do. You want to serve. And that's this attitude. That's the same mindset. If our people don't have a mindset to work, what led to this conflict you're talking about in the universities and in the FUCs is the same thing. As soon as a regime came on board asking questions in a supervisory role, you now have these problems. That's what creates the problems. Because, like I keep saying, without contact, there's no friction. So, mathematically, what you would see that what we've been doing, last week, the permanent secretary and myself, we were working on transfer of teachers, and they brought me some people who wanted to serve in different parts of the state because they become directors, assistant directors, they've had all the deputy directors, they've had all this training. All this training is there. It's about mindset. The training is already, before you become a professor in Nigeria, and I will tell you, it is not true, they are very, very qualified. They are. It's the mindset that rules that qualification that is key. It does not matter how, in fact, my village people say, no matter how beautiful a woman is, it's her heart that is more important. It is the same thing. No matter how dressed out a professor of academic laurels you put him, if he does not have the mindset for service, it will not happen.
So you put him on the job, and he doesn't have the mindset, and it's evident he doesn't have the mindset. Why don't you kick him out?
We just done. We just dissolved the council in Port Harcourt. We dissolved the council at Urenkoku. We dissolved the council at
Good point.
You know, one of the things you notice is someone like Malam Adamodu, who's a strict disciplinarian. He's almost exebic. I keep saying he doesn't want anything. He just keeps. So it's not like, but you can't just overdo it. That's not the idea. The idea is to make sure that you're doing this in a principled and governed manner. The action is being taken everywhere, and people are seeing results. If you tell me you want to serve in a particular, I'll tell you this is federal character. If you're from Igbo land, you must go to Katsina. That's for me. And people say, "Oh, you're my brother. Help me stay in." I say, "I'm not your brother in this work."
Honorable Minister of State, happily you've been in this environment. I'm sure Professor is here, and Professor Martin may also testify to this. Haven't we seen a situation where in our universities we have graduated to a level of villagization of the administration? I'm sure you understand.
We're coming to that. You
Yes.
see, right now we're working on a policy in that direction. You see, like everything, our favorite hymn as children was all things wise and wonderful. God made them all. But we now corrupted that everything nice. Our Nigerians can like to spoil them. The idea of having people to work in their area it sounded nice at the time. But, you know, gradually it has become a burden. And the NUC, like I told you, Professor Rashid and his team have worked out something in the mix. We're going to try to marry the mix from pro-chancellor to vice-chancellor so that there won't be... In fact, there's a Federal Character Commission that is overseeing this engagement. And we have tons of petitions from around the country dealing with non-compliance with the Federal Character. And to think that this is a law is not just... Which is why I keep saying we must come to it with a different mindset. It's the mindset that is the issue. The laws are there. The Federal Character Commission already has said the four key functionaries of the university, the bursar, the vice chancellor, the librarian, and the registrar, all must come from different. All of this is already in law. Why it does not happen is a function of how our people behave. Again, we must address that as a people.
Okay, I will ask a general question. Are teachers at the basic primary school level, are they better paid now? Are their rewards now gotten here? Because in the past, it used to be their rewards, they get their rewards in heaven. Have they started getting their rewards here on earth now? But you will respond to that after, because we've got quite a number of tweets and we must take them. Kingsley?
Well, that's right. We're going to have to go through the tweets now. Mutana Farouk, I have a different opinion on the reopening of schools. Is it how we are going to continue to keep the students away from the schools if the spread of coronavirus persists? For how long will it take the government to come out with a better alternative to this?
Okay, we'll get to the minister's response to that in a short while. But AJ 2020, Honorable Minister, sir, when will government start paying lecturers in universities that have subscribed to IPPIS?
Now, Nwogugu Silvanus, expand the campuses to admit more qualified students seeking admission. Pay lecturers, tutors, and teachers at all levels very well as at when due. And finally, stop forcing children not meant for academics into university. It is also counterproductive.
Okay, Ibrahim Abdusalam Bello, education is really suffering a serious setback, and there seems to be little or nothing being done to revive the sector and get it working again. I cry anytime I look back to the 80s and early 90s and compared to now. We are completely off track.
Mutana Farouk, education is a social vehicle that drives society to a prosperous destination. Handling it with levity spells doom.
All right, and Nwogugu Ikechukwu Sevenal says, it's a shame for an engineering student to do IT in a provision store. Let core members serve only in the sectors of their courses and students to do their industrial attachment only in the operational sectors of their fields of study. Sending everyone for teaching is counterproductive.
Abdul Rahman, well, Lawa, that's an ITF, part of ITF responsibility. It's, again, it's like medical students who graduate and they say they want to do housemanship and they know there are no spaces for them to do the housemanship. In the meantime, doctor to population ratio, it's abysmal. All right, Abdul Rahman Lawal, COVID-19 has come to stay. Shutting down everything because of COVID-19 isn't the right approach. A student old enough to write WAEC can prepare him or herself against COVID-19 with the authorities ensuring social distancing.
Okay, it continues on the back.
I know that's would just it's a bit
okay. This is Ibrahim Abdusalam Bello again. Serious politics now played in the sector. State governors sack non-indigenous teachers and employ indigenous ones who are most times incompetent. Now, all in the name of providing jobs for their people. They end up building structures at schools without building the capacities of their teachers.
This is Law Alpha says the vagaries of coronavirus pandemic entail that the education sector will be reasonably hampered, and that is a fate that the pupils, students, and even parents have to understand. But as Lawal also indicated, he says we have to take a sensitive decision not to hold back our children in school, because recruitment age will be set at not more than 27 years.
Okay, we have quite a number of tweets. Let me just quickly run through the name. First was Akimbo Iwa, Adamu, Estefanus, Bademosi, Arun Adamu, Deshola, Chris Simeon, Steve Bond, Mike Ayanko, Comrade Ngala, Dele Jack Solomon, Yunusa Idris. I have all your tweets here. We have all your tweets here. Sorry, we cannot take them. And Kisley, just to say that we haven't heard from Cecilia Okoroma and
Cecilia Okoroma.
No,
she was on Monday to Thursday. She's one of our regular contributors. I was just wondering, very quickly, Prof. Nala, we have kept you on hold, but I just want to take this from Professor Mate in Maiduguri. Professor Mate, is it possible for us to ignite a conversation around improved governance in our universities, in tertiary institutions, incorporating the idea of some reasonable tuition, but how do we ensure that there's good governance and accountability? Some of the universities you know very well, some of them are running the pure water business and so on and so forth, and some of those pure water businesses have been handed over to their relatives or their wives. How do we get out of this? What lessons can we learn from other jurisdictions?
We can effectively do all that if the management of these universities have our children and the university at heart. Because all the universities, they have governing councils, they have management board, and they can sit down and articulate, policies of fairness. Because if all of us are thinking of Nigeria, thinking of our children, thinking of our university, then we can effectively, channel all these resources and make sure that no individual really uses that money. Even a vice chancellor, unless the board or the council it's also involved, will not just arbitrarily uses the money of that university the way he likes. I know like if a university with a population of 40,000 students, even if they charge 30,000, that's 1.2 billion. And most of these universities, they have Center for Distance Learning, and they get close to 1 billion for that. And then they run also diploma courses illegally, some of them under what's called consultancy. And that also generates lots of money. So as I said before, really, even if you give some of these universities 10 billion per year, they will still have these problems if the money...
Thank you, Professor Mate. Thank you for that. And that's why I'm going to take my question to the Vice Chancellor of University of Abuja. VC, briefly, in less than 60 seconds, I know since you assumed the VC of Uni Abuja, what are the major issues that you've had to deal with?
Well, repositioning the university. When I came in, truly speaking, it was not a place that you would describe as a pride of our nation. Infrastructure was probably none. I mean, just abysmal. So many things. I mean, you will enter that campus and you will be shocked, really, that this was the nation's capital. But you see, we have to be realistic, and that's all I was asking for. Some of this assertion that American University, all my life, all my career was in the United States. I was a higher education administrator. And I came back to Nigeria as Vice Chancellor of Kwara State University, and for 5 years, I run that university without subvention from government, not even a kobo to pay salary. The point I'm trying to make, please let me make this point.
If you can make the point, but you will not be on air. So what is going to happen is that we're going to have to revisit this subject matter. We're going to have to revisit it, and I'm sure our producer is listening. You'll be one of our guests. If the Honorable Minister is ready to focus on that issue, we'll also bring him in. But we have to appreciate you, Professor Abdul Rashid Nala, Vice Chancellor, University of Abuja. From Maiduguri Network Center, Professor Issa Hussaini Marte, Commissioner for Higher Education, Borno State, deep thanks for you being with us. And Honorable Chukwuemeka Nwajuba, Honorable Minister of State for Education. Gentlemen, we really thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right, so that does it for us today on the program. We thank you for being with us. The program returns on Monday, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, have a nice weekend. But remember, stay safe and be well. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
I'm Claire Delabu Abdulrazak. Bye-bye.